those endless days and sacred days you gave me. I'm thinking of the day.
Okay, thank you. The Kinks. I'm just going to say a few words about Peter. You're welcome if you want to, sit down. I'm not going to be all that long, actually. I'm going to put my glasses on. Sorting through Peter's life in photographs yesterday. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So sorting through Peter's photographs yesterday with Tori, that you can see here, it became clear that there was a red thread, and the most loved photographs were trains, dogs and cats, Tori and the family. It became really clear. And sometimes in a photograph, all three were together. And Peter had what people say is a good eye. He was observant. He took a good photograph. He saw what there was to take. Dogs leaping, dogs resting, often dogs resting. And you can tell much from a person through what they saw through their eyes, and how they captured what it was they were looking at. And I'm going to go through the photographs in my mind as I talk to you and take up these three loves of Peter's. Trains. I'm going to start with trains. I mean, after all, Tori met Peter from a train. In Peter's own words in his interview as a signalman in Hazelmere, he said, I did the usual things. I worked in the city, got married, had children. He worked at Hemy, as you've actually already heard, since 1991. And he talked about commuting. This is very Peter. It was very different then, he said, very sociable. People didn't start quite so early. And those days were the halcyon days when breakfast was served on the train. Full English, in green china, or if you weren't quite so well off, a bacon sandwich, and if you were poor, tomatoes on toast. He described himself as a poacher turned gamekeeper. After he had that successful career in Hallgabet, he returned to his passion, which was trains, and he became a signalman at Hazelmere Signal Box. He had the knowledge. As a schoolboy, he had travelled by school on steam trains, and he grew up with the demise of the Great Western, 1965, and became involved in the Great Western Society. And before he knew it, he was on the board, and he was only just out of short trousers then. And later, in longer trousers, he got involved in Didcot. I had to look up what Didcot was, the former Great Western Railway engine shed and locomotive stabling point. And there's a photograph of him, just here at Didcot. James Webb said at Peter's retirement speech, if I was having a bad day at Havant, I'd always check the roster to see if Peter was on the late turn, so we could chat the whole afternoon away. As I became hooked to his stories, he was an excellent historian, a keen political observer, and a great follower of arts and music. Right, so as I was saying, he met Tori by train. Was it quite like that?
At Surbiton Station.
At Surbiton Station.
Go on.
It is no secret that Tori and Peter met on a blind date. So he came.
Internet dating, yes.
Internet dating. So it has its own etiquette, Tori described to me, which involved quite a lot of winking and signalling. But eventually they went out to dinner together where they discussed their relative pasts, and Tori said, yes, House of Commons, at which point Peter said, you must have known my first wife who worked at the House exactly the same time as you. The only problem was Tori had taken 5 years off her internet dating vital statistics. So, unmasked and true and honest from the start, they began their 10-year friendship and relationship and love. They were both similar and both different. Peter had huge, this is Tori's words, tolerance and was unjudgmental. Speaking as a Kennet, this is not a trait that is easy for us. So how fantastic it was to have that relationship and that marriage. They both loved the Kinks. He said, I liked company, but I don't crave company. He was happy in his own company upstairs, making models of the model railway. And after he had finished his day's finished Sudoku by the morning, he was content. I first met Peter in Malmesbury at Alex and Kerry's wedding. And the photograph of that wedding is up here on this family board here. Family and friends. In fact, I kind of first heard of him through Tori laughing after what had been a long time of not much laughter. And she was laughing, again, like a young girl, slightly naughty, quite cheeky. And I turned the corner and saw the cause of this laughter, Peter sitting on the farm cottage veranda of that wonderful place, with a pint of ale beside him, and just saying something to make Tori laugh. He not only embraced Tori's family, as you can see from the photographs, but he became also a father figure to Charlie, and with enormous generosity offered Charlie his flat at Liphook as an independent space that Charlie could call home. Tori and Peter travelled much together, and we have a travelling board here. And he, yes, well, some of them are there. And Peter said to Tori, I think you should know I haven't flown for 30 years and I have a phobia of flying.
This is when we were on the plane for our honeymoon.
On the
And he was a quick late.
They shared a love of dogs. Peter had always had dogs, and between them, in 2017, Peter and Tori got Gus to accompany Millie. I'm sure all of you know the dogs well. And the happiest place for dogs, Peter and Tori, was Girvan. And Girvan, as you probably know, was the house in Scotland where Peter's parents had retired to. The house that had been kind of left exactly as his parents left it. But it wasn't the house that held the time. Apart from the harbour bar, naturally Peter's favourite haunt, it was the empty beaches and the National Trust castle and park at Culzean, right by the sea, where they would walk and spend time. Or latterly, Tori would walk the dogs and Peter probably in the Harbour Inn. Last Easter, 2019, was the last time that they visited Girvan because a fire seriously damaged the house. And the last photograph of Peter is with Domino in the kitchen, holding that beautiful cat with such tenderness. And although this photograph is taken by Tori of Peter, I return to Peter's eye and his taking of photographs there. He said, I'm ringing from the early departure lounge, Peter said to Tori from Kingston Hospital, in his wry humour, never missing. How are the dogs? Well, Peter, the dogs are fine, and we're going to take care of the dogs and Tori.
Very good. Very good.
Just got a bit of kinks to finish.